As of 2023, Mexico no longer switches their clocks forward or backwards. Well, most of Mexico. And on the second Sunday in March, daylight savings time starts in the United States and Canada, but not in Mexico. And if you live in Mexico but work with people in the United States or Canada, this is going to be confusing. Trust me, I have done the research to make this video. I'm finding new respect for Q RuPaul. In this video, I'll be talking about the parts of Mexico that still use daylight savings time, some tips on how to mentally prepare for the time change, and translating times between Mexico and your northern friends. We'll talk about technology, how it will save us, or will this be another Y2K moment? And we'll talk about some practical impacts like when should you schedule your sunset cruise? And finally, we'll talk about how it could actually get more confusing in the future. But let's start out with a shout out to Spencer from Mexico City who recommended making this video. You may have met Spencer in a video that we did together about Social Security disability payments in Mexico. It'll be somewhere up there. I love it when y'all suggest topics, so be sure to reach out in the comments if you have ideas. Second, we need to have a little interstitial because all of you in Gen Mex will appreciate this movie reference. Time change. We don't need no stinking time change. I'm Brighton, and along with doing really bad imitations of older movies, my wife and I moved to Mexico part-time 3 years ago. We both work remotely, so daylight savings time has been a challenge. In the past, Mexico and the US both did spring forward and fall back, but not on the same date. So it was always a mess. Now it's easier, but definitely not simple. First off, 90% of Mexico stopped doing the change the daylight savings time thing, but there are a couple of areas that still do daylight savings time. The state of Baja California continues to maintain the same time as the US state of California. So whatever California does, so does Baja California. Now, a quick geography lesson. We live in the state of Baja California Sur, but it's below the state of Baja California. It's like Virginia and West Virginia, except people don't marry their cousins here. The second area where the time in Mexico matches the time in the United States is along the border with Texas and New Mexico. There aren't many immigrants from the US and Canada living in those areas, so it's less important for this YouTube channel. An interesting note is that right here along the Arizona border, they don't have a special time zone. Arizona is a special time zone. They don't do daylight savings time in Arizona. They are permanently on standard time. Real quick pause. I need to let Nugget out of my office. Okay, so let's talk about how to mentally master the time changes. I never got the spring forward, fall back, and what that all meant. Do I get less sleep or do I get more sleep? I don't know. But here's the scoop. In the winter, it's simple. For the most part, whatever the time is in the US, just north of where you are in Mexico, that's the time in Mexico. So in La Paz and Cabo, they match mountain time in the winter. Mexico City matches central time, and if you go all the way to the east, Cancun matches eastern time. That's the winter, when both countries are on standard time. Now let's talk about the summer, starting the second Sunday in March. Everything shifts. Well, everything in the United States and Canada shifts. Everything shifts so that places in Mexico have the same time as places in the United States that are one time zone to the west. You could think of it as in the time zones in the United States sprung forward to the right, and Mexico time zones stay where they are. So in La Paz and Cabo in the summer, that now matches Pacific time. Mexico City matches Mountain Time, and Cancun matches Central Time. The good news is that our technology should handle a lot of this for you. Like if you schedule a meeting in Google, then Google should translate the time for someone living in the United States or Canada. The confusing part comes in when you have a recurring meeting. Say you have a standing meeting with your boss at 9 a.m. La Paz time. And your boss is in LA. In February, before the spring forward in the United States, your boss's clock would say 8 a.m. when she meets with you. However, when the United States switches to daylight savings time, your clocks will match. This is the confusing part. Will your clocks match at 8 a.m., which was her original time, or will your clocks match at 9 a.m., which was your original time? Or to put it another way, will you need to move the meeting to 8 a.m. from your normal 9 a.m. time, or will your boss need to move the meeting to 9 a.m. from her normal 8 a.m. time? It depends on who set up the meeting in the first place. The good news is that Google will handle all of this for you and your boss. However, your boss in the US has no idea what I'm talking about, and there's a good chance that you have no idea what I'm talking about because it's confusing stuff. And if the meeting moves an hour forward in her calendar, she may be confused. All of her other meetings stay at the same time because everyone else who works in the United States experienced the exact same spring forward that she did. Trust Google or Microsoft or whatever to move your standing meetings to the proper time, but note that the time may change from the time you are used to, or it may change for the other attendees back in the United States or Canada. Okay, so you're feeling pretty good about technology making your life easier, right? The problem is that some technology may be a bit confused itself. Take Alexa. As of March 3rd, the Alexa programming still plans to spring forward in Mexico. I'm not sure if they'll figure this out in advance or how many other computer systems haven't gotten the memo yet.
In Baja California Sur, daylight saving starts on April 2nd, 2023 at 2 a.m. and ends on October 29th, 2023 at 2 a.m.
So you know that if you're working with folks from outside Mexico, this change will have some impact. But what about folks who've already retired? What other impacts are there? It turns out the reason that places like the United States still have daylight savings time is that there are some pretty big impacts of not having it. For instance, without daylight savings time, the sun would rise around 4:15 a.m. in Chicago in July, and the sun would set around 7:15 that same evening. That's not much fun in the summer. But back to Mexico. The biggest impact will probably be in the hotter coastal towns. So compared to last summer, the higher temperature during the day will start and end earlier. For instance, in La Paz, the temperature for the last few years was over 90 degrees in late August from about 10 a.m. to about 6 p.m. But going forward, that heat of the day will be more like 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. So you'll need to get up extra early to get a few games of pickleball in before it's too hot, but you'll be able to open up the windows and let the cool evening air in a little earlier too. Okay, final segment. Up in the United States, people don't like switching their clocks around. The United States Senate has already passed a bill to make daylight savings time permanent. Yes, you heard that correctly. In Mexico, we now have permanent standard time, but in the US, the Senate wants to have permanent daylight savings time. This was actually attempted back in the 1970s, and people hated it. Back to Chicago in January, this would mean that the sun doesn't come up until after 8 a.m. in January. It's hard enough to wake up before the sun, but this would feel like waking up in the middle of the night. The reason the U.S. House of Representatives hasn't passed that Senate bill is because they cannot agree on which time is the right time to keep. By the way, sleep experts say that the way it's done in Mexico should be the way it's done in the United States. Always standard time. If the Senate gets their way and the US gets permanent daylight savings time, that would mean that when you drive south, the time would always change. San Antonio, Texas would be 10 a.m., but Monterrey, Mexico, about due south, would be 9 a.m. Essentially, the maps line up nicely right now in the winter, where driving north or south, you'd pretty much be in the same time zone. But in the US, the idea is to permanently make them not match. Who knows what will happen in the US? So although this is a bit confusing, it's really confusing because of the United States and Canada, not Mexico. If you want to simplify your life, especially if you're retired or the concept of time otherwise doesn't matter to you, then why not move to Mexico where the clocks never roll back or roll forward? They just keep moving in one direction at a much slower pace. Now, check out these folks over here who have already made the switch, and make sure to share this video with others in Mexico who need to get a handle on this time change thing. Hasta luego.